Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to be talking about a particularly fucked up case, and I'm kind of surprised I had never ever heard of it, even though it allegedly made international news. I'm kind of surprised it wasn't a bigger deal in the sense that it wasn't flooding social media so that either I would have heard about it or one of you guys might have heard about it and then messaged me. I don't know. I'm just surprised I didn't know because truly the absolute chaos that is all of this. Also, I'm going to be reading an article from the Daily Mail. The only reason that I'm doing this is because this is the one that has the most details. Of all the articles I've read, they've all been extremely short. They haven't included context. They've left out a lot of things that actually are very significant to the case in my opinion. So I'll link those other articles down below, but this is by far the one that has most information, so I apologize for that. Incest woman 20 and her baby are laid to rest after being murdered by her husband's father, as her birth mother says she was initially given up for adoption as an infant because he was abusing her. The young woman who was murdered by her father after they had an incestuous relationship, which resulted in a child, has been laid to rest alongside her baby. Stephen Pladl, 42, who reunited with his daughter Katie Fusco, 20, after giving her up for adoption as a baby, murdered their infant son Bennett, shot dead Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco, 56, before turning the gun on himself earlier this month. Katie, her son, and Anthony Fusco, also known as Tony, were buried at St. Charles Borromeo Church in Dover Plains on Saturday. Because this is relatively confusing, this couple have a child. Stephen Pladl has a child. He gives up this child. The child is adopted by the Fusco family. This child, Katie Fusco, decides to meet her biological parents. The biological parent, Stephen, decides to kill Katie, her child, and Katie's adoptive father, and then himself. In 1995, Stephen Pladl was 20 when he met a 15-year-old girl named Alyssa on the internet. She soon became pregnant and gave birth to a girl they named Denise. Alyssa Pladl told the Associated Press in an interview last week that they put up the girl for adoption when she was 8 months old. They were young and poor, she said, but she also believed Stephen Pladl physically abused the baby. It was so hard to give her up, Alyssa said, but I had to because I wanted her to live and be happy. The couple later went on to have 2 more daughters, now aged 8 and 12. Aged 8 and 12 back in 2018. Tony Fusco and his wife, Kelly, adopted the girl. They renamed Katie and raised her with their biological daughter in Dover, about 80 miles north of New York City. They had a very normal life, said Kerry Gould, Kelly Fusco's brother. My nickname for Katie was Pac-Man. She was always eating. She loved animals. She was a vegetarian. So with her adoptive family, Katie seemed to have a relatively normal life from what we know as outsiders, which very quickly and abruptly changed. After turning 18 in January 2016, Katie, who Gould said had been told she was adopted, found her birth parents and messaged them. The Pladls were happy to reunite with her. Instead of going to college in August 2016, Katie moved in with the Pladls in Virginia that month. Tony and Kelly Fusco were apprehensive, Gould said, but they thought Katie was old enough to make her own decisions and supported her. All was not well in the Pladl home. Stephen and Alyssa had already decided to separate and were sleeping in separate rooms. Alyssa said she'd suffered emotional and verbal abuse by her husband for years. So already here, Katie is going to see her birth parents, and the father, Stephen, is abusive. Or was abusive towards specifically his ex-wife. Let's say she started from what looked like a stable situation and went directly into what seems kind of like a lion's den, to be honest. I was always on eggshells. Whatever his mood was, everybody knew, and that mood was often not happy. A lot of yelling, a lot of things smashed in the house in front of our kids, she said. Alyssa told Katie privately that Stephen had abused her as a baby and that a major reason for the adoption was her own safety. Katie, according to Alyssa, didn't appear to be concerned. So this is also part of where I wonder if feelings for her father, creepy to say, had already developed and that's why she was not that shocked about the abuse or maybe didn't believe it. A relatively predictable reaction would have been to be in shock, maybe having difficulty to believe it, but also why would your own biological parent try to tell you that your dad was abusive? That's why you were adopted. Like, unless they're really just trying to be cruel and make shit up, I don't know why someone would lie about something that serious. I mean, people have done worse things, so it's possible, but then again, if you're staying with a person and you trust enough to stay in their house, wouldn't you trust them enough to believe that if they say abuse occurred, that in fact did. Steven's behavior changed after he met Katie, Alyssa said. He began wearing skinny jeans and form-fitting shirts. He shaved his beard and let his hair grow long. About 6 weeks after Katie moved in, Steven one night slept on the floor in her room. It immediately concerned Alyssa. After he did again the next night, she confronted him. He said it was none of her business and stormed out of the house with Katie. Alyssa finally moved out in November 2016, and she shared custody of 2 children with Steve. So this is really where shit starts to get openly fucked up. Steven's behavior is alarming to me. Now, obviously, a couple that's separating is not always going to get along, but I mean, when your soon-to-be ex-wife is asking you, why are you sleeping on the floor of our grown daughter's room that we're just reestablishing a relationship with, it is weird, okay? It's weird. I think what's creepy is, okay, well, I'm not going to tell you why I'm sleeping in that room. Does that make sense? Because there are plenty of reasons why you could sleep in the same room and it's not a big deal. Anxiety, paranoia, there are plenty of things that I know that could justify that. But the hiding of why or not talking about it is what says suspicious immediately. In May of 2017, she learned from her 11-year-old daughter's journal of the incestuous relationship and Katie's pregnancy. Her daughter wrote that she and her sister were told by Steven to refer to Katie as their stepmother. Amongst all of this, I'm only going to mention this briefly because we don't know enough, and I mean, frankly, I just hope they're okay. But the children experiencing this, being privy to information that one parent doesn't know, I don't know, I just feel like this would be incredibly traumatic for the children, especially once they get to a certain age where they can understand how fucked up what's going on is. And I mean, obviously this ends in death and murder, so there's also that layer, but just even processing the fact that they were living in a house with 2 people that were related. And I think the weird thing too is that you're your father's kid, right? And then you see your father having a relationship with the other kid. As a young child, that would also make me wonder, okay, what are parent-child relationships supposed to be like? I feel like that completely displaces understanding of what family's supposed to be like. That might just be me coming up with random shit, but that's the first thing that came to mind. It's like a child's idea of family is based on what they see around them. So if they see that, I started to become hysterical and I called him. She said, I said, is Katie pregnant with your baby? He just said, I thought you knew we're in love. I started screaming, she said. I was just cursing him out. How could you? You're sick. She's a child. And then she called the police. I also think there's something, and I don't use this term very lightly, but the term that did come to mind for me was, it is a little bit psycho to respond to your ex-wife freaking out about you having a kid with your kid and you just being like, oh, I thought you knew. You're talking to her as if you just like bought a tea set and you're like, oh, I thought you knew I bought a new tea set. Like, this is groundbreaking, life-changing, traumatizing. This is not something that you're just like, oh, did I forget to tell you? Like, what? I don't understand. As a general rule for all of this video, I do not understand. On July 20th, 2017, 2 months after his divorce from Melissa was finalized and amid the police investigation, Steven married Katie in Maryland. They lied on their application, saying they were unrelated, according to records. Katie's adoptive parents posed for a photo on the wedding day along with Steven, Katie, and Steven's mother. Katie wears a short black dress. Okay, hold on. The adoptive parents were just like okay with it? What is going on here? I truly am having a really hard time following this story because none of these people, except for Alyssa, are acting in a way I can make sense of. Tony and Kelly Fusco thought there was nothing they could do and had decided it was best to support Katie, Gould said. I don't know how you get to the point of supporting that. Katie gave birth to Bennett on September 1st. She and Steven moved to a house in North Carolina, but wedding bliss did not last long. They were arrested on incest charges in January. A judge ordered them to not contact each other, and Steven's mother had custody of their child. Steven's lawyer, Rick Friedman II, said there was never an allegation that Steven pressured Katie into a relationship. This is an 18-year-old girl who shows up on the doorstep of a 40-year-old man who's going through difficult times with his wife, Friedman said. They have a bond because they're biologically related, but they never knew each other before they had a sexual relationship. He was head over heels in love with her, so much that outweighed the issue of them being biologically related. No, absolutely not. As soon as he knew, like if she had hidden that she was his daughter, we're talking about something completely different there. But as soon as you know that you're biologically related to someone, there should be a wall that's like 100 fucking meters tall that says no to any kind of behavior of that sort. There should be an immediate lack of attraction. There should be a shutdown. After the arrest, Katie moved back with the Fuscos. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she would travel to her adoptive grandmother's home in Connecticut. On April 12th, Katie and Tony Fusco left the Dover home for Waterbury. In a minivan nearby, Stephen watched them leave, surveillance videos show. Minutes later, in nearby New Milford, witnesses reported someone opening fire. Katie and Tony Fusco, 56, were fatally shot. Stephen was later found dead of a self-inflicted gunshot back in Dover. Shortly after the New Milford shooting, Stephen's mother Grace called 911 to report her son had told her he killed the baby, Katie and her adoptive father. So, amongst revelations regarding grief, Alyssa brought something else up. She also revealed how the warped predator Stephen kept a stash of guns and bore all the hallmarks of a mass shooter in the making. Pladl faced incest charges in Virginia, but while the terms of his March 16 bond prevented him from contacting Katie or Alyssa, Pladl had no specific restrictions placed on his access to Bennett. Officers believed he embarked on the killing spree after learning Katie wanted nothing more to do with the incestuous marriage. I keep thinking of how lucky it is that I and our children weren't part of the shooting spree, said Alyssa. He had an obsession with guns, he had been an outcast in school, he hadn't had a job for 8 years, he fitted the exact profile of one of those mass shooters. Alyssa had previously obtained protective orders banning Pladl from going near her or her family, but she cannot understand why court would not extend that same protection to Bennett. Pladl was originally released February 20th on a $28,000 bond, but lived in a hotel in Virginia because he was barred from returning to North Carolina. Stephen shouldn't ever have been allowed back to North Carolina where he had access to his house, his weapons, the baby, said Alyssa. It's a shocking failure. I can understand that they like to put children in the hands of relatives, but not Grace. She wouldn't have been able to stop him from seeing the baby if she wanted to. Steve may have found a way to get to him, but they could certainly have made things much more difficult for him. I think they could have helped to prevent some, if not all of this. If anyone is brought up on charges of incest, they should never be allowed near minor children. They did not consider how sick a mind he had. Now, there's another layer to this, which is how Alyssa met Stephen Pladl, so how Katie's birth parents met each other too. Alyssa met Pladl on the internet in 1995 when she was 15 and living in San Antonio, Texas, and he was 20 and based in New York. I know that there's always debate over age gap relationships, but truly I don't think there's a debate here. If he's 20 and she's 15, or the other way around, she's 20 and he's 15, there is a problem. A 20-year-old and a 15-year-old cannot relate in that type of way. Obviously, legality is a thing, and I think we all know. Illegal, first of all. But second of all, there's no way in which you can make this okay to me, ever. They exchanged messages, love letters, and Stephen visited Texas to begin an underage relationship with her despite the disapproval of Alyssa's parents. Alyssa was pregnant at 16 and gave birth at 17. She says she can see parallels with the way Pladl groomed her as a teenager and how he seduced Katie. The mother of 3 also disclosed that one of the main reasons she gave Katie up for adoption at 8 months was because Pladl was physically, though not sexually, abusive. He was hurting her. There were many times she had several bruises. There's some dark stuff I don't want to put out there because I don't want to hurt her mother and sister any more than they're already hurting. But physical and verbal abuse can be just as devastating as sexual abuse, and when you're at that age, you don't think anyone will believe you. So beneath this whole article, there's a thing about genetic sexual attraction, which is defined as an overwhelming sexual attraction that may develop between close blood relatives who first meet as adults. Genetic sexual attraction is said to be rare, but there have been dozens of reported cases of close relatives falling in love with each other after reconnecting as adults. In 2016, Patricia Spann, 43, and her daughter Misty Spann were arrested and charged with incest after they got married. Okay, that's enough. I think we've all heard enough for several lifetimes. This story is so tragic in so many ways. I think part of why this story is so tragic, the deaths obviously aside, because that's immediately tragic, is when you think about it, the idea of meeting your birth parents if you were adopted, if you decide to meet them, should be exciting, right? To meet other people who are your family, who are a part of your life, even if they haven't been there physically. They're why you're on Earth in the first place. And I feel like that could be so exciting, so interesting to find out even why you are the way you are, maybe similarities with your parents. There's this kind of excitement of getting more answers about who you are, and then it just goes in this fucked up direction of having a father who has multiple issues, is abusive, has the mass shooter vibe going on, and then is also creepy towards you. And I mean, I don't know how consensual all of that was, so I'm not gonna even go there, but they did get married. It seems like there may have been feelings on both sides. I don't want to guess, but it's a possibility. It's one of those things that could have gone into such a wholesome direction, but it got contorted, and I think that's what makes it even more tragic, because it started, at least on her end, as something completely relatively normal for an adopted kid or adult, she was 18, to want to find out more about themselves, right? Anyways, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.